Hello everyone, and welcome to a discussion on a country that is commonly noted to not truly exist. The wonderfully Wallonian, the viciously Vlaanderian, Treaty of London benefactory of Belgium. In many ways, Belgium has long played the battleground of great powers in Western Europe, and in 1939, nothing has changed. So, with all eyes on the Benelux, let's take a look at how Belgium is doing. Today, Mordred Viking, who to me I recall being a YouTuber, now nation designer, will show off the new Belgium focus tree. I must apologise for the format not having the normal indents to align the text in the middle, but alas, this is how the diary was delivered. Regardless, let's take a look. So this is the focus tree as we see it, and just casually looking through, it seems to have a pretty good size about it. It's interesting they've gone for the very rare, unique form of a focus tree branch, kind of being hidden away offside. This is something you see a lot with mods, but not too common here. In total though, we see an army branch, we see the political branches, we've got some democratic, some fash, some communism up the side, an industry tree, and then a very suspect looking blurred branch. I'm sure I'll have to talk about that at the end of the video. Then we have an air branch and a navy branch. So nothing too surprising in what has been shown. There is this secret section off to the side, which we're going to cover, and then the actual secret hidden in the middle. So, on the front, Belgium isn't looking too dissimilar to what we know and love, except now with 5 new national spirits and a new portrait for their new leader of Paul von Zeeland, meaning Hubert Perlo takes a backseat as he doesn't even become Prime Minister until 1939 and the outbreak of the war. The new national spirits are predominantly negative, as can be expected for an artillery shell crater of a nation. Language barriers stands to note the difference between the Dutch and French-speaking partition of Belgium. Chasseurs Ardennes, probably said wrong, reflects the reality of being an incredibly flat and forest nation. I wonder where Denmark's mountain debuffs are. Scars of World War I reflects exactly that. I really like the interplay of poppies below the gravestone, the helmet being an echo of the tragedy of those trenches. Corruption mostly speaks for itself, as you'll be hard-pressed to find many countries truly free from corruption. And finally, economic downturn. Maybe the Great Depression is greatly hitting Belgium, as their factories factor has ballooned like the Walloons had feared. In total, we're looking at some pretty significant debuffs. I mean, the war support and division org is really terrible, and for corruption I think everything across the board, but the construction speed is not particularly nice. I'm interested to see though if stacking corruption and just letting it play for a while might help you in certain paths. To play as Belgium, you're going to need to balance a tug-of-war between 2 key sections. A government that wants neutrality and a rejection of the greater powers conflict, and a nation that, in reality, should ultimately prepare itself for a war that is coming, regardless of what the government wants. Which way, Western man? Let's start off with the military and national defence. As I mentioned on the overview, there will be a section dedicated to making Belgium a turtle shell, hunkering down in its own independence. Using what we know, it seems the branch is about building up forts along the border with Germany and the Netherlands, basically expanding the Maginot, with buffs to defending such fortifications. There is even an option to defend against France, if you think the French defence will falter, and you'll be defending on all fronts. For a more proactive resistance, damn the consequences is a nice pun of a focus which will most likely unlock a raid or boost a raid to slow down German aggression in the Rhine Valley. Damn the consequences. Terrible. And so for every defense also comes an offense, ironically starting with a defense bill. Belgium needs not live on the back foot, and has a branch to try and overcome the legacy of the Great War Spirit, to instead field a sizable army. One cannot ignore the centre of a nuclear chemistry. Maybe that's a faster route for building a nuclear facility in Brussels. But beyond that, I think all the focuses are pretty much what we can expect. As you might be able to see, the bulk of this dev diary is less revealing individual focuses, but showing off bulk branches. So as we now move to the industry tree, let's see what we can try and interpret. The domestic Belgium industrial tree is surprisingly small. I'm sure the blurred image has something to say about this, with expected focuses to do with railways, resources, getting civs, and most likely research slots. Again, no huge surprises here, but that blurred image is certainly hiding something. Now please forgive me if I pass over the air and navy focus branches, as with no focus reveals, we move like wind. Speaking of wind though, note the early helicopters focus on the bottom. Fast-tracking Belgium into a helicopter power might be a funny strategy for some home defense, but I'm unsure of its effectiveness. The navy tree doesn't reveal too much either, but a standard growth of navy, hopefully to maintain some control over the Congo in Africa, which has surprisingly gone unmentioned thus far. I'm sure that blurred section also has nothing to do with it. We do get to see the port of Antwerp focus though, allowing for extra trade resource per factories, which as I have mentioned before is cool conceptually for allowing nations to maximize trade output. I would hate to backseat game development, but I think a feature that would coincide with stuff like this is a fixed trade treaty mechanic with nations. Instead of buying and closing resources whenever you want, you can agree to sell a certain amount of resources over a fixed period of time for a negotiated amount of civs. I guess kind of like how the international market currently works. Then, focuses like this would buff one side's negotiation power for a better rate. And then finally, to cancel said deal, it could maybe cost something like political power. So in theory, you can now play a nation in the Middle East, for example, who can contact nations to sell their oil, as opposed to how it is now, where only the person buying the oil has complete autonomy over whether you get any civs, or whether they just completely stop trading with you and you lose all your industry. I don't know, I just think it would be such a good rework. If only there was some kind of Middle East, South Asia DLC on the horizon. Never mind. Having just talked about the Middle East, I see no better time to start talking about the political branch. In brief overview from left to right, we have the historical democratic branch, the two fascist branches, a republican democratic branch split between liberals and socialists, and finally a purely socialist and communist branch on the very end. The dev diary notes that monarchism is a recurring theme of all the branches to some degree, so there is no miss on monarchy, unless you depose the king, of course. To begin the political branch, you must first address the faltering government. As mentioned earlier, they are stuck somewhere between corrupt and indecisive over the future of Belgium, so an initial choice is trying to form a new government of either national unity or leading from minority. Historically, Paul von Zeeland didn't get enough votes, so had to work to form a national government. Which sadly doesn't go too well, as Paul is also caught in said corruption scandal. The unity government collapses, and it looks like it's up to good old monarchy to set us back on track. The two new candidates are the historical democratic Paul Emile, on the left there, versus de Grelle, on the right, who is also literally on the right, and is far more axis aligned, and so will lead to some fash paths. The historical tree, in its finality, will have you try to open back channels with the Allies, using the Dial plan to secure a rapid Belgium defence when needed, work towards some economic recovery, while also dealing with a third leadership succession crisis. Goodness, how many leaders does Belgium need? The choice at the end will have you decide if you want to stick with your third choice of Spark and work towards an ahistorical European Union, which yes, of course I do, or stay more to reality and have a fourth leader, or have a fourth leader, no joke, where you break neutrality and join the Allies. We're not done talking about the historical branch just yet though, because the next section I find very interesting, as it's both the government in exile branch, assuming that Germany invades Belgium and you capitulate, and possibly a monarchist branch? Should Germany have found itself wrongly inside your borders, again, you can take this focus to unfit to rule, to historically call the king out for wrongfully surrendering, working towards a continued war effort, and then restoring Belgium, assuming D-Day goes well and Belgium's back in power. After that, you unlock an option to choose between what I assume is a purely democratic government, a regency under King Leopold III's brother, Charles, which is what happened historically, or just bring Leopold back and think it's all just water under the bridge. The middle section is shared to both choices, and seems to mainly focus on the government in exile bonuses, assuming that Belgium surrenders. The right branch, however, maintains the king's surrender not as acceptance or cowing by the Axis, but as steadfast captaincy, going down with his ship. With this, Leopold works from within the German-held Belgium territory to boost his own popularity and work towards a, and I quote, monarchist resurgence? If this is the true monarchist's path, I'm surprised. It's wrapped up in so much of the democratic tree. I would have thought there would have been more of an expansionist option, maybe for an old Leo, but I guess I haven't counted all my chickens yet. There may still be some monarchist branch out there. Okay, being on YouTube, it's rewind time. Let's go back 5, 4, 3, 2 to our second Prime Minister during his corruption scandal, and the King has instead chosen de Grelle. As leader, he will have to champion the ideals of one of the two fash factions. The Rexists want a strong Belgium, and to do so that faces the reality of Germany at their border. In this, you will most likely join the Axis, and serve as another minor nation in their faction, like Croatia, or small Hungary, although hopefully stronger than Croatia. The central branch is shared between the two factions, and most likely has more generic buffs for building up the strength of the nation, with a confirmation of an option to peacefully, quote-unquote, annex Luxembourg. The VNV branch really steps into the lands of alternate history, as you expand the ambitions of Belgium to unify the Benelux into a stronger power, move your sights onto France for that oh-so-tasty Calais, before working towards becoming the state of Burgundy. I'm not sure any amount of cause can justify such an abomination of a state, but alas, I'm sure there's some particular mod enjoyers out there who may find this a familiar return. I hope you're all still with us as we march towards the finish line. The path of constitutional crisis to me is quite odd, as this is Hubert Perlot, who would go on to be our fourth Prime Minister in the historical branch, can step in early to denounce the King's appointment of de Grelle, force his abdication, and run a new snap election. Funnily, the choice here is the same as at the bottom of the historical branch. Instead of Spaak's crisis between him and Perlot, it's now Perlot's election between him and Spaak. Sticking with Perlot and the Liberals, you work towards joining the Allies, which I must say is quite odd. Does this path serve as a way to fast-track you into being an Allies member, ignoring Belgian neutrality, or something else? Because I'm unsure why you would take this branch over the historical branch if they both culminate in kind of exactly the same outcome. Not knowing the focus rewards makes this all super misty. Alternatively, on Spaak's socialist side, there is some interest in joining the Soviet Union to have protection under the Comintern, which is important because, of course, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact should serve as a true bulwark, ensuring that Belgium does not be invaded by Germany, if not only for a little while. Shared between the branch is a focus on making a new Belgian Maginot, which, as we can see here, is visually far more impressive than the pathetic-looking normal Belgian Maginot. Ugh. Now that bottom one, that's a Maginot with some chest hair. I will finish my coverage of this dev diary on the communist branch. Well, kind of, because Belgium was already quite progressive than some of its European counterparts, so the outrage demanding a flip to communism wasn't prominent, and so you must first begin by maintaining the original minority Labour government under that first PM, without a government of national unity. From there, you must try to enact policies towards a more socialist Belgium. Inside, we can see focuses allowing Belgium to send volunteers abroad without harming their neutrality, options to deal with the horrors of the Belgian colonial rule, and ultimately a choice between flipping communist under growing threats of Germany with Raise the Red Flag, or continuing down to form the European Union. The dev diary just says that, without any other comment. Just casually form the EU, alright, fair enough. I'm sure everybody's on board with joining the Socialist European Union, absolutely fine. Lol. Alright, so that wraps up my coverage on the Belgium focus tree, and in truth, I'm left with more questions than answers. In some way, I feel the portrayal of Belgium isn't as high fantasy as perhaps some other focus trees, as it's all very localised to the European theatre, maybe with a little bit touching on Africa. Many of the paths feel very matter of the fact, event following after event, in their outcome, meaning one can almost predict the feel of certain paths unless the focuses themselves have some far more outlandish secrets hidden within them that the dev diary doesn't tell us. I'm also really confused how different the historical branch is versus the liberal branch, because, as I said earlier, they're so similar that there must be some strange mirrored goal that I'm not quite getting. The resurgence of the European Union being mentioned in multiple focuses raises 1,000,001 questions about how does one even form such a thing? Is it a faction like in the Netherlands, or has it the formable nation maybe come back with some love and is actually an expanded mechanic of turning the coal and steel agreements into a pact of peace in Europe? Questions, questions, questions. Lastly, now we know what lies inside the overall focus tree, what do we think is under the hood of that blurred section? Here's my guess. A foreign diplomacy path. There's such little mention of contacting others that pretty much every tree branch involves domestic policy, apart from maybe the V&V path. I think the blue focuses may even involve European outlooks, as they mentioned it in part being connected to the small industrial tree. So let's say maybe a section on the left with trading with other powers, maybe some industrial focuses inside of there, something at the top to do with general diplomacy, maybe something on the right to do with colonialism in Africa, and then working down, more and more focuses becoming more outwardly expansionist, stuff like that. Some of this may even involve the European Union itself. I'll just be surprised to see a section that big and it turns out it's exclusively about the Congo. I think it must apply to all forms of interactions with foreign nations, including land you haven't annexed yet. I mean, what do those blue-looking focuses look like they could be about? With that guesswork out of the way though, I'll say thank you very much for watching. I think in terms of curiosity, I'm most excited to see Belgium. Well, maybe I want to see the German alt history paths a little more, but then it's Belgium. Next time, I have no idea what will be happening, as I think CK3, Wandering Nobles DLC releases, but I will almost certainly see you for alt history Germany, if not the Congo. Who knows, maybe I'll stream the Congo. If you want to see any of that, then please, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.